What occurs when a neighborhood collective misconstrues Leonardo DiCaprio's reserved demeanor as vulnerability and provokes him beyond reasonable limits? A scenario that commences with damp footprints beside a swimming pool progressively evolves into a conflict about territorial boundaries, psychological manipulation, and the unspoken wrath of an individual who merely sought tranquility. However, by the moment they comprehend whom they were antagonizing, the situation has already reached an irreversible point. This isn't the Leonardo familiar from cinematic productions. This is the Leonardo who demonstrates that exhibiting kindness doesn't equate to permitting oneself to be exploited. And upon concluding this narrative, you might identify aspects of yourself within him. And prior to delving into the story, inform us of your geographical location. We appreciate observing your commentary illuminate the geographical distribution. The sun in California was descending with lethargy over the arid topography of Chandler, adorning the firmament with golden and crimson tints. A dry atmospheric current gently oscillated the elevated palm flora, and the subtle resonance of liquid movement along the perimeter of an aquatic recreational structure appeared to be the sole indication of vitality in that secluded segment of existence. Leonardo DiCaprio, having reached the age of 60, traversed deliberately around the pale azure swimming facility. His attire consisted of a faded ebony upper garment, shorts, and deteriorated footwear that seemed to have aged synchronously with his inner essence. Every progression was calculated. Every kinetic expression conveyed the solemnity characteristic of an individual who had acquired an appreciation for serenity, not as an extravagance, but as a personal achievement. The posterior section of his residential property functioned as his sanctuary. With elevated barriers, meticulously maintained partitions, and a simplistic yet vibrant horticultural area, that spatial domain represented the tangible manifestation of everything he had learned to safeguard: silence, deliberate isolation, and constancy following turbulence. The aquatic feature particularly constituted the core of this sanctuary. It wasn't merely an excavation filled with chemically treated water. It represented a reflective surface mirroring the tranquility he had pursued for numerous decades. While he scrubbed the edge of the pool with a cleaning implement, an unexpected surge of thankfulness enveloped him. Existence had been protracted, intense, replete with illumination and obscurity. But presently, here in Chandler, he finally experienced a sensation of possessing what he had consistently desired: tranquility. The residential district had undergone transformation over the chronological progression. The established familial units, those who recalled the serene golden chronological periods of reciprocal respect, were systematically being substituted by more youthful couples with vociferous offspring, unrestrained canines, and vocal expressions excessively amplified for Leonardo's perceptive inner self. Nevertheless, he attempted comprehension. The universe undergoes transformation, he conveyed to himself. The critical aspect is maintaining explicit boundaries. It was during an arbitrary Saturday that an anomalous occurrence transpired initially. Leonardo had just emerged from the swimming facility when he observed damp foot impressions on the terrestrial surface. These weren't his own. They were recent, disproportionately small for his pedal extremities. They extended toward the opposite boundary of the yard near the partition that segregated his domicile from Emily's. Peculiar, he muttered, furrowing his brow. Just a minimal distance away, one of the pool's flotation devices was dislocated, resting on the grass in a partially deflated condition. He remained stationary, observing it for an extended temporal interval. Perhaps it was atmospheric movement, or possibly a creature. But intrinsically, he already comprehended, this wasn't a coincidental event. That nocturnal period, he secured the entrance more meticulously, reinforced the alerting mechanism. But when matinal hours arrived, he opted to convince himself of overreaction. Perhaps it was merely an error, he vocalized audibly, as if capable of deceiving his own cardiac organ. During that identical morning, he encountered Emily. She materialized on the opposite side of the partition, holding a vessel of infused herbal beverage, and adorned in one of those sophisticated exercise ensembles worn by individuals who never genuinely engage in physical activity. Her facial expression of pleasure was expansive, exaggerated, the variety trained to appear amicable. But her visual organs betrayed a glimmer of superiority. "Salutations, neighbor. You must be Leonardo. I've acquired substantial information about you," she articulated. Her audible expression of amusement was high-pitched. Leonardo inclined his head politely. "Good matinal period. My offspring were absolutely enchanted by your aquatic facility. Yesterday they maintained discourse about a magical lacustrine entity adjacent. You comprehend how juvenile individuals operate." She audibly expressed amusement again, but there existed a derisive undertone in her vocal expression. Occasionally they become excessively enthusiastic. If they generated any disarray, inform me. Acceptable? He nodded again. He lacked definitive verbal response. He was still processing the conceptualization that those pedal impressions might not have been accidental. And now here was Emily. All expressions of pleasure and dulcet tones, already establishing foundations to normalize the circumstance. And subsequently, through the narrow apertures in the partition, Emily's tenuous vocal expression resonated again, almost melodic. "They're merely juvenile individuals, Leonardo." And she audibly expressed amusement with a sweet and venomous resonance. He remained immobile, observing the aquatic undulation, the celestial chromatic shift, and his boundaries, his sacred arduously acquired boundaries being disregarded directly before his visual perception. Emily remained unaware that this aquatic disturbance would constitute the initiation of the conclusion. The subsequent morning, Leonardo positioned himself at the periphery of the pool, gazing into the motionless liquid. The audible expression of pleasure from the preceding day still reverberated in his cognitive processes like a distant recollection that refused dissolution. He had dedicated his entire existence to avoiding confrontational interactions. In a universe that frequently rewarded acoustic emission, he had selected silence. Not due to frailty, but because he valued tranquility above victory. But tranquility, as he was beginning to comprehend, could only exist when it received respect. That afternoon, he determined to communicate with Emily. She was external, hydrating a linear arrangement of botanical specimens that appeared excessively manicured to be authentic. Her physical bearing was graceful, her movements theatrical, resembling a female constantly cognizant of being observed, even in the absence of spectators. "Elevated again," she articulated, without rotating her cranial structure. Leonardo stood behind the partition, manual extremities in pockets, composed but resolute. "Emily, I require discourse with you regarding yesterday." "Oh, I comprehend, I comprehend." She interrupted him, turning toward him with an expansive expression of pleasure. "The male offspring can exhibit somewhat wild behavior, but honestly, Leonardo, they're merely juvenile individuals. And you're so solitary in there, I considered it might be pleasant for you to perceive some audible expressions of pleasure for a variation. They entered my aquatic facility without authorization. But they didn't fracture anything, correct?" She inclined her cranial structure, visual organ sparkling with amusement. "Come now, don't embody that neighbor stereotype." Leonardo experienced something shift internally. It wasn't wrath yet, it was incredulity. She wasn't expressing contrition, she was engaging in psychological manipulation. Respecting someone's spatial domain isn't optional. Emily produced a soft chuckle, like an educator tolerating a perplexed student. "Leonardo, without offense, but you possess this exquisite aquatic facility, and you never utilize it. What detriment occurs if a few juvenile individuals experience enjoyment for an hourly duration?" He abstained from response, there was nothing further to articulate. Over the subsequent weekly period, the visitations persisted. Only now they exhibited increased audacity. The boys commenced bringing companions. 4, 5, occasionally 6 juvenile individuals would occupy his yard, creating aquatic disturbances, vocalizing loudly, leaving behind nutritional wrapper materials and vacant carbonated beverage containers. One afternoon, he discovered his pool skimming implement fractured into 2 segments and discarded like refuse. Another diurnal period, someone had employed his garden hydration apparatus to project water into the exposed apertures of his storage structure. Leonardo attempted to maintain composure. He secured the entrance more firmly, added a chain and new locking mechanism. Still, the invasions occurred. It wasn't exclusively juvenile individuals anymore, it was absence of lawful order. He initiated discourse with the neighbors, carefully, politely. Some listened, most smiled awkwardly and elevated their shoulders in a gesture of uncertainty. "That's just Emily," one of them articulated. "She's confident." Another, a male in his fifth decade with an expanded abdominal region and a lethargic vocal characteristic audibly expressed amusement and stated, "You're a significant celestial entity, man." What constitutes a few neighborhood juvenile individuals creating aquatic disturbances? Interpreted as complimentary. Leonardo returned to his domicile that evening experiencing a heavier sensation than he had in years. He wasn't wrathful yet, not entirely. What he experienced was worse, moral solitude. The variety of isolation that infiltrates when the surrounding universe concurs with what's incorrect and designates it normal. That nocturnal period, he requisitioned a set of high-definition security monitoring devices online. Motion-activated, nocturnal vision, wide-angle optical components. If no one believed his verbal expressions, perhaps they'd believe recorded visual evidence. He also reinforced the entrance once more, installing a steel supportive component and customized padlock. Every threaded fastener he inserted into the wooden material felt like an anchor, not into the partition, but into his entitlement to say, "This is mine, this is sufficient." When the equipment arrived, Leonardo dedicated temporal resources to establishing it. Precise, quiet. A new routine formed. Every nocturnal period, after solar descent, he would position himself in his living area, consume green-infused herbal beverage, and review the recordings. For the initial few diurnal periods, it was just what he anticipated. Children surreptitiously entering when the yard was vacant, producing soft laughter, creating aquatic disturbances, occasionally projecting objects into the garden. But then came the recording that transformed everything. It was a Tuesday nocturnal period. Leonardo had just seated himself, remote control device in hand, fatigued, but focused. He accelerated through the usual recorded material. Juvenile individuals ascending the partition, their silhouettes traversing under lunar illumination, until he observed something different. A pause, reverse, play. There it was. It was a Thursday evening when Leonardo returned to his domicile and sensed something was irregular. Even before he rotated onto his street, he could perceive it audibly. Musical sounds, audible expressions of pleasure, the unmistakable acoustic emission of a multitude, where there shouldn't exist one. As he approached his vehicular access path, his steps decelerated. His entrance, the one he had secured with diligence, was widely exposed. From behind the elevated wooden partition, he could observe shadows executing dance movements across the pale vertical surfaces of his domicile. Flickering illumination, movement. He wasn't perplexed. He was astonished. Leonardo traversed around the lateral aspect of the domicile, past the narrow path bordered with succulent and cactus botanical specimens, and halted abruptly in his physical progression when he reached the posterior yard. There were minimally 20 individuals in his yard. Adults with crimson solitary utilization cups in their manual extremities, juvenile individuals traversing barefoot across the lawn. A male inverting meat patties at a cooking apparatus that wasn't his. The pool sparkled with anatomical structures, children creating aquatic disturbances, adolescents reclining on flotation devices, musical sounds emitting from a wireless audio emission device he didn't possess. And there, in his preferred reclining chair, the one positioned optimally under the shade of the pergola, sat Emily. Adorned in a white two-piece aquatic attire and oversized optical protection devices, she consumed wine like royalty, supervising her estival domain. She elevated her visual perception when she observed him and smiled as if they were established companions meeting at a neighborhood outdoor culinary social gathering. "Oh, salutations, Leonardo, you've returned prematurely." He abstained from response. He couldn't. Emily continued, undisturbed as if this were her residential structure. "We concluded you wouldn't object. You never utilized this spatial domain and the juvenile individuals were expiring for some pool temporal allocation. And with this elevated thermal condition, ugh, it just established logical sense." He observed the surroundings at the unfamiliar individuals traversing across his garden, the damp pedal impressions on his stone path, the greasy atmospheric emission from the cooking apparatus rising above his aloe vera botanical specimens. There existed no hesitation in them, no culpability, no awkward audible expression of pleasure. Only the variety of confidence that originates from someone who's absolutely certain they'll never confront consequences. Leonardo exposed his oral cavity, then sealed it. His pharyngeal structure was dry, not with thirst, but with quiet, simmering incredulity. Without articulating verbally, he rotated, traversed through the domicile, secured the frontal entrance behind him, and seated himself on the couch. The acoustic emission of the social gathering filtered through the apertures like a pathogenic invasion. He didn't produce lacrimal fluid, he didn't vocalize loudly. He didn't even move for hourly durations. The domicile felt more diminutive than usual, like the vertical surfaces were collapsing inward. This wasn't merely an invasion of spatial domain. It was betrayal of everything he believed he had earned: respect, stillness, privacy. Late into the nocturnal period, the acoustic emission finally commenced reduction in intensity. Engines initiated function, audible expressions of pleasure diminished, and trances forcefully closed. By the temporal point the final footsteps disappeared, Chandler was quiet again. Leonardo's manual extremities exhibited slight tremors. They had expressed gratitude to her, not him. They had utilized his domicile, his tranquility, his property, and assigned the acknowledgement to her, and worse, they had transformed him into a passive character in his own existence, a spectral entity haunting the background of his own narrative. He observed the screen for an extended temporal duration. His reflection in the vitreous material appeared fatigued, weathered, but something stirred in his thoracic cavity, something he hadn't experienced for a very extended temporal duration: wrath, not rage, not violence, a slow, clean, righteous anger. Leonardo DiCaprio had dedicated decades to avoiding conflict. He'd permitted the universe to designate him quiet, odd, even reclusive. But there existed a demarcation, and Emily had traversed it like it wasn't even present. This wasn't about juvenile individuals anymore, it wasn't even about Emily. It was about boundaries, about decency, about the quiet male who provided individuals with the benefit of uncertainty, and what transpires when someone determines to incinerate that trust to the terrestrial foundation. Leonardo inhaled deeply, he deactivated his telecommunication device, acquired a refuse container, exited the domicile, he commenced cleaning. Methodically, without acceleration, without emotion, but behind those composed visual organs, a plan was already forming. They had mistaken his kindness for weakness, they had confused his tranquility for submission. That constituted their initial error, it would also be their final one. The subsequent morning Leonardo awakened to a notification in the community group. Gratitude for yesterday, Emily, the social gathering at Leonardo's was amazing. He observed the screen, and for the initial occasion in years, Leonardo DiCaprio was wrathful. Something within Leonardo had shifted. After the social gathering, after the digital communications, after being erased from his own spatial domain, he ceased verbal communication and initiated planning. No additional warnings, no additional reasoning, just action. He operated a vehicle to a local security commercial establishment and communicated clearly. "I require something that prevents individuals from entering." He departed with reinforced locking mechanisms, motion-activated cameras, flood illumination devices, and one special item. A chemical coloration for pools that reacts to urine, harmless but unmistakable. It exhibited luminescence in contact with bodily fluids. At a print shop, he ordered a custom sign. "Pool treated with chemical agent, contact with water, may cause cutaneous irritation or discoloration. Unauthorized entrance will be documented. That nocturnal period, he installed everything, bolted in new locking mechanisms, wired the cameras, poured the coloration quietly into the pool. To the unassisted visual perception, the liquid appeared unchanged. By morning, the sign was positioned. Emily passed by, observed it, and audibly expressed pleasure with significant volume. Drama, she articulated softly. 2 diurnal periods passed. Quiet. Then, motion alert. Leonardo examined the cameras. Emily's offspring had scaled the entrance again. One of them indicated the sign, then they entered the water with force, audibly expressing pleasure. Leonardo didn't react. Until 20 minutes subsequently, when the pool water commenced exhibiting luminescence, pale azure, then verdant. The coloration had executed its function. The boys exhibited panic, rapidly exiting the water, observing their cutaneous surface. One produced lacrimal fluid, the other vocalized loudly. Then they accelerated their movement. Leonardo observed, composed. Minutes subsequently, Emily forcefully contacted his entrance, furious. "What infernal action did you execute?" "I protected what's mine," he replied. "You induced toxic effects in them." "No, I added a harmless coloration, and no individual was supposed to occupy the pool." She ceased movement, the falsehood lodged in her pharyngeal structure. "You're psychologically disturbed, this is mistreatment." He progressed closer. "No, what's psychologically disturbed is educating your offspring that everything belongs to them, even what doesn't." She departed with forceful movement, dragging her stained offspring behind her. That nocturnal period, she initiated a campaign in the neighborhood group Digital Communication. Leonardo is unstable. He positioned chemicals in his pool. This is hazardous. Some joined in, but others didn't. A few silent vocal expressions broke through. There existed a warning sign. He communicated with her before, it's his property. And just as Emily thought she'd assumed control again, Leonardo accessed the group, prepared to respond. That nocturnal period, Leonardo posted to the neighborhood group, with video evidence, footage, and one inquiry no one could address. The subsequent morning, Emily was infuriated. Information had disseminated rapidly. Some parental figures had observed the strange green tint on their offspring's lower extremities and were now questioning everything. She executed movement rapidly, messaging the HOA group, creating acoustic impact on entrances, whispering her version to anyone who'd listen. He utilized chemicals. He deceived the juvenile individuals. He's hazardous, unstable, opposed to children. In the neighborhood Digital Communication, her tonal quality was sweet but calculated. "I just experience concern, what if something worse occurs next occasion? I comprehend Leonardo possesses a historical background, and I respect that. But don't you consider this as slightly extreme?" She depicted herself as the protective maternal figure and Leonardo as the reclusive, bitter male who abhorred joy, and worse, abhorred juvenile individuals. For a few hourly durations it functioned. Some neighbors supported her. Others remained silent, which in Emily's cognitive processes indicated approval. But not every individual concurred. Subtle communications commenced appearing. Didn't he position a sign? He did attempt to communicate verbally with her before. It's his pool. Emily disregarded them. She increased her commitment. He established them deceptively. What variety of adult executes that? But what she remained unaware of was that Leonardo had been observing everything unfold and preparing his response. That nocturnal period, just after 8 p.m., a new communication appeared in the neighborhood group Digital Communication. Leonardo Reeves. "Good evening. I've been quiet while many of you communicated about me. Now I'd prefer to exhibit something to you." He attached 4 brief videos from his security footage. The first exhibited the boys scaling the partition. The second exhibited Emily clear his day, extending through the entrance and unlocking it. The third, the social gathering. Loud musical sounds, dozens of unfamiliar individuals. Emily reclining in his chair, and the fourth was the moment the die activated. Silence followed. Then the comments initiated a rival. Wait, she exposed the entrance herself? This isn't what Emily articulated. That's a comprehensive social gathering in his yard. I'd be furious too. Leonardo didn't exult. He didn't respond. He just added one final sentence. Being quiet doesn't equate to being weak. Emily didn't reply. But the silence that followed wasn't in her favor this occasion. The subsequent day, Leonardo seated himself by his aperture, consuming infused beverage, observing the street. A few neighbors who once looked through him now offered quiet inclinations of the cranial structure, sheepish manual gestures. No individual articulated much, but they observed him now. That evening, there was another acoustic impact at the entrance. He exposed it slowly. Emily, no facial expression of pleasure, no offspring, just her. Alone, visual organs flashing. You humiliated me. Leonardo remained quiet. You caused me to appear foolish. No, he articulated softly. You executed that independently. Her vocal expression sharpened, interwoven with venom. You're a bitter solitary male concealing behind cameras and locking mechanisms. He didn't exhibit alarm response. And you're the variety of individual who educates her offspring that regulations don't apply to them. She observed him, mandibular structure tight. You believe you've been victorious? Leonardo elevated his shoulders in a gesture of uncertainty. I wasn't engaging in competitive activity. Emily released respiratory gases, a bitter audible expression of pleasure, then progressed backward. You're pathetic. He encountered her visual perception composed. Kindness is not weakness, and maternal status isn't authorization to traverse boundaries. She rotated and departed without additional verbal expression. Leonardo sealed the entrance gently. Inside, everything was motionless. The acoustic emission of the AC, the repetitive sound of the chronometric device, the soft undulation of water outside. The conflict wasn't concluded yet. He could perceive it, but for the initial occasion, he wasn't engaging in conflict alone. Emily departed, exhibiting tremors with rage. But the subsequent morning, Leonardo perceived quiet footsteps in the yard again, followed by a strange acoustic emission, his sensors triggering. The subsequent morning, the atmospheric condition was dry and motionless. Leonardo positioned himself by the aperture, consuming coffee, visual organs fixed on the posterior yard. The sensors had activated around 6 a.m., not motion from juvenile individuals, not small and chaotic, but deliberate, careful, adult. He reversed the footage, a figure approached the entrance, not Emily, her marital partner, tall, quiet, always in the background. Now here he was creeping around the lateral aspect of the partition, illumination device in manual extremity, extending for the latch like a male about to settle a score. The locking mechanism maintained. He agitated it, paused, then departed. Leonardo didn't react. He didn't require it. Later that diurnal period, he accessed the community group digital communication and posted one final message. To those who requested proof, I've provided it. To those who assumed, I forgive you. But I won't be silent anymore. Attached was a final compilation video. Every unauthorized entry, every falsehood, every moment Emily had pushed past a boundary. The silence afterward was deafening. Then, one by one, comments commenced appearing. This alters everything. I'm so regretful, Leonardo. I should have articulated something sooner. We owe you respect. It wasn't a victorious oration. It was veracity. And veracity didn't require applause. That afternoon, for the final occasion, Emily appeared at his entrance. She didn't create gentle acoustic impact. She created forceful impact. Leonardo exposed the entrance slowly. Her visual organs were crimson, countenance tense. "You ruined my reputation." "No," Leonardo replied. "You executed that when you communicated falsehoods. You caused everyone to abhor me." He released respiratory gases, calm and deliberate. "Individuals don't abhor you. They observed you." Emily's vocal expression fractured. "You don't comprehend it. I was just attempting to make things lively. You sit in that domicile like a spectral entity. You never communicate with anyone." Leonardo progressed forward. "And that provides you authorization to acquire what's not yours." She exhibited alarm response. "You're just an elderly male with a pool." He maintained her visual perception, steel behind the composure. "And you're a mature female who never acquired the verbal expression no." Emily's visual organs accumulated fluid, not from melancholy, but humiliation. Her vocal expression descended to a hissing sound. "You believe this is concluded?" Leonardo inclined his cranial structure. "For you, perhaps it never is. But for me, it's completed." She moved her cranial structure in the negative, rotated sharply, and departed, rigid, burning with the thermal energy of a female who had lost control of the narrative. Leonardo sealed the entrance behind her. The quietude returned, but it was a different variety of silence now. Not heavy, not tense, just authentic. That evening, as the solar entity descended behind the rooftops, he exited to the pool. The liquid was motionless. The sign remained positioned. The locking mechanism untouched. For the initial occasion in weekly durations, there were no pedal impressions, only stillness. He seated himself in the reclining chair, his chair, and permitted the silence to wash over him. He didn't experience triumph. He experienced wholeness. The boundaries were clear now. The communication finally had been perceived audibly. But as the nocturnal period arrived and the yard became dark, Leonardo perceived a soft rustling acoustic emission near the entrance, and then the clicking sound of a latch attempting and failing to yield. The nocturnal period was quiet. No vocal expressions, no aquatic disturbances, no musical sounds creeping over the partition. Just the soft acoustic emission of the desert atmospheric current moving through the palms. Leonardo seated himself in the darkness without footwear, observing the security feed on his telecommunication device. Everything was motionless until the sensor produced a beeping sound. Motion, posterior yard. He didn't execute movement. Just observed. The cameras illuminated. A male crept through the shadows, moving toward the entrance. Not rapid, not loud, measured. Leonardo's marital partner. He observed the surroundings, then extended for the latch, click. The reinforced locking mechanism maintained firmness, and then the irrigation system produced a hissing sound to life triggered by motion. Sprinklers emerged from the terrestrial surface and projected him with cold, pressurized liquid. He lost balance backward, soaked, and astonished. Leonardo positioned his telecommunication device downward and smiled, not from spite, but from tranquility. He didn't approach the entrance, didn't vocalize loudly, didn't require it. He just observed. And for the initial occasion he experienced it completely, the stillness he had engaged in conflict for. Not just physical quietude, but earned tranquility. In the diurnal periods that followed, things transformed quietly. Emily ceased traversing near his yard. Her offspring no longer peeked through the partition, no additional social gatherings, no additional acoustic impacts, no additional communications. Neighbors inclined their cranial structures when they passed him, some exhibited facial expressions of pleasure. A few even expressed contrition in hushed tonal qualities. Leonardo didn't exult, he didn't maintain grievances, he just returned the cranial inclinations and progressed. The pool remained hygienic, transparent, untouched. His sanctuary, finally, his again. He dedicated his matinal periods to reading under the pergola, afternoon periods trimming his cacti, evening periods observing the solar entity paint gold across the sky. The cameras remained, the signs maintained position, but he no longer examined the feeds obsessively. He didn't require it. The communication had been received, and the silence was finally respected. One evening, while consuming infused beverage, Leonardo observed the pool and reflected. How odd, he cogitated, that something as simplistic as boundaries could generate so much conflict. But it wasn't about the pool. It never was. It was about respect, about how easily individuals traverse lines when they consider you won't impede them, and how powerful it is, how necessary it is, to draw that line and maintain it. Even if your vocal expression exhibits tremors, even if you're positioned alone, especially then, he never communicated verbally with Emily again, never required it. Some individuals only comprehend when they're disregarded, when they finally experience the discomfort they once generated in others, and Leonardo, he didn't require vengeance, he didn't require acclaim, he just required tranquility, and now he possessed it. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoy this video and learned a lesson. I would be grateful for your likes, and don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.